She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet Emily, a 28-year-old woman who found herself in the most unexpected and difficult situation. Emily had always been independent, hard-working, and fiercely determined to make her own way in the world. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, struggling to balance her long shifts with her financial troubles. But things took an unexpected turn when she received a phone call that would change her life forever. The call came from her father, who, in a desperate voice, told her that her family's medical insurance had been canceled due to unpaid bills. Emily knew this would lead to serious consequences. Her mother's health was already fragile, and they couldn't afford any medical emergencies. Her father told her that a wealthy Dr. James Turner, had agreed to help by offering a generous sum of money in exchange for something that Emily never could have anticipated: a marriage contract. He explained that Dr. Turner was looking for a wife to help with his social standing. He was cold, distant, and focused entirely on his career. But he needed a wife to keep up appearances for an upcoming charity event. At first, Emily was stunned. She couldn't believe her father was asking her to marry a stranger, someone she had never met, just to save her family. But with her mother's health on the line and no other option in sight, she reluctantly agreed. The next day, she met Dr. James Turner. He was everything she had imagined: tall, handsome, and completely indifferent to her presence. His cold blue eyes looked at her with no emotion, as if she were just another patient to be examined. Emily's heart sank. This wasn't going to be easy, but she had no choice. The wedding was arranged for the following weekend. On the day of the ceremony, Emily stood in front of the altar, feeling more like a business transaction than a bride. Dr. Turner didn't even glance at her as she walked down the aisle, his focus solely on the ceremony. Their vows were simple and clinical, with no real emotion behind them. But something unexpected happened after the wedding. Despite their cold, contractual relationship, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Turner might not be as heartless as he seemed. His actions, though brief and fleeting, showed small glimpses of kindness. He opened doors for her, ordered her favorite meal without asking, and even made sure she had everything she needed for the first few days of their new life together. It was as though he was testing her, waiting to see if she would reciprocate. Emily tried her best to ignore her growing feelings. This was not a love story. This was a marriage of convenience, one she couldn't afford to get emotionally attached to. But as the days passed, she found herself questioning everything. What if Dr. Turner wasn't as cold-hearted as he appeared? And what if, just maybe, there was more to this marriage than she had originally thought? But before Emily could explore these thoughts, she received news that would throw everything into chaos. A complication had arisen with her mother's medical condition, and Dr. Turner had the power to cancel an important surgery that could save her life. Emily felt helpless. She knew she needed to convince Dr. Turner to make the right decision. But would he? Would he choose her mother's life over his own ambitions? The tension was unbearable as Emily prepared to confront her husband for the first time about something truly personal. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, but she had no choice. This would be the test that would define their future together, one way or another. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. Now that Emily and Dr. Turner are officially married, the reality of their cold, business-like relationship started to settle in. Emily was still reeling from the shock of agreeing to this arrangement, but she had no choice. Her family's well-being was at stake, and she couldn't let her mother's health deteriorate any further. In the days that followed their wedding, Emily found herself adjusting to her new life, one that felt like she was living in a stranger's world. Dr. Turner kept his distance, rarely speaking to her unless it was necessary, and even then, it was brief and impersonal. Emily tried to keep her emotions in check, reminding herself that this was all for her family. They weren't supposed to fall in love. But despite the walls Dr. Turner put up, Emily couldn't help but feel something stir within her. The little things he did, like asking if she was comfortable or offering her a blanket on the couch when she was cold, left her wondering if there was more to him than his cold exterior. Still, she refused to get her hopes up. He was a man driven by his career, and Emily knew that. He was a surgeon, known for his precision and success, but also for his aloofness and lack of personal connection. But that was the man she had married, someone who lived for his work, who didn't have time for anything else. Emily's life was now a strange balance of maintaining the facade of a happy couple and trying to keep her emotions from overtaking her. Then, one day, Emily received the news that would change everything. Her mother's condition had worsened, and she needed immediate surgery. The only person who could help was Dr. Turner. Emily's heart raced. She knew this would be the moment of truth. Would he help her mother, or would he remain cold and detached, as he had been since their marriage? She stood in front of him that evening, her mind racing with questions. "Dr. Turner," she began hesitantly, "I need you to help my mother. The doctors say she needs surgery right away, but they're not sure who can perform it. You're the best surgeon in the city. Please, can you do it?" Dr. Turner looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak for several seconds, and the silence between them felt suffocating. Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "I don't know, Emily. I have a lot of patients to attend to. I can't just drop everything for this." Emily's stomach dropped. She had expected some resistance, but hearing it from him, especially after everything she had done for him, stung more than she thought it would. "Please," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "She's my mother. She's the only family I have left. If you don't help her, I don't know what I'll do." Dr. Turner didn't respond right away, and Emily could see his internal struggle. His gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of something behind his cold eyes, but then he quickly turned away. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I can't cancel my schedule for this." Emily felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. This was it. She had no other options, no other way to save her mother. She turned away, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. She had hoped, for just a moment, that Dr. Turner might surprise her, that he might care enough to help. But now she realized that the man she married, this man who had promised nothing but a formal contract, wasn't capable of offering her the one thing she needed most: compassion. Just as she was about to leave the room, something unexpected happened. Dr. Turner called out to her. "Emily," he said, his voice softer now. She turned back, confused. "I'll do it," he said, his tone more genuine than she had ever heard it. "I'll cancel my surgery for tomorrow. I'll do the procedure for your mother." Emily's heart stopped for a moment, disbelief washing over her. She had no idea what had just happened, but she couldn't deny the relief flooding her chest. "You will?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "I will," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "I know it's important to you, and I can't just stand by and do nothing." Emily didn't know how to react. She had expected him to be cold and unyielding, but instead, he had done something that she never would have anticipated. Was this the beginning of a change? Could there really be more to Dr. Turner than the distant, unemotional man she had married? This unexpected gesture, though small, sparked something inside her. It wasn't the grand romantic gesture she had imagined, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something real between them. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her, as Emily sat by her mother's bedside, waiting for Dr. Turner to arrive, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The man who had been so distant and emotionless, the man who had once agreed to marry her purely out of convenience, was now offering something she hadn't expected: help. But could she trust this change? Could a man like him, so focused on his career, so indifferent to emotional connections, truly care? Emily had no answers, but she couldn't deny the small spark of hope that flickered inside her. The hours seemed to stretch on as she sat in the sterile hospital room, her heart pounding in her chest. Every minute felt like an eternity. Her mother had been unconscious for days, and the surgery was her only chance at survival. If Dr. Turner didn't keep his word, they would lose her. She couldn't let that happen. She had already lost so much. As the clock struck midnight, the door to her mother's room opened, and in walked Dr. Turner. Emily stood quickly, her breath catching in her throat. He was dressed in his usual crisp, white coat, his expression serious as he approached her mother's bed. For a moment, he didn't say anything, simply examining her mother's condition with a focused intensity that made Emily feel like an outsider. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered between the medical equipment and her mother's frail form. Then, finally, he turned to her. "We're going to do this," he said, his voice soft but firm. Emily couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Turner nodded, but his eyes were distant, unreadable. He quickly got to work, preparing for the surgery. As the night wore on, Emily found herself unable to tear her eyes away from him. There was something different about him now. The coldness was still there, but it was tempered with something else, something human. She couldn't place it, but it was there. It made her wonder if, deep down, he was more than just the career-driven man he had presented himself to be. When the surgery was finally complete and her mother was safely out of danger, Dr. Turner came to speak with her. "She'll be fine," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "The procedure went well. We'll keep her under observation for a few days, but she should recover." Emily felt as though a weight had been lifted from her chest. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've saved her life." Dr. Turner's expression softened slightly, and for a brief moment, he actually seemed to care. "I didn't do it for you," he said, his voice quieter now, "but I'm glad I could help." Emily couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment at his words. She had hoped that there might be more to his actions, that this small gesture would lead to something deeper, but he remained as distant as ever. Still, she couldn't deny the fact that he had done something remarkable. He had put aside his usual indifference to help her family, and for that, she would always be grateful. As the days passed, Emily and Dr. Turner continued their lives together, still bound by the contract of their marriage. But there was a subtle shift in their dynamic. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. They spoke more often, more openly, and while their conversations remained formal, there was a growing sense of mutual respect between them. Emily couldn't help but wonder if, maybe, there was more to this marriage than she had originally thought. Could it be possible that Dr. Turner wasn't as cold as she had believed? Could he, too, be longing for something more than the lonely, distant existence he had built for himself? The questions haunted her, but she couldn't find the answers. It was only when Dr. Turner made an unexpected gesture that Emily began to realize that perhaps their story was far from over. One evening, as Emily sat in the living room, reading a book, Dr. Turner walked in and handed her a small box. "What's this?" she asked, her voice curious. He didn't answer right away, simply watching her as she opened it. Inside the box was a delicate necklace, a simple silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a heart. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected anything like this. "I thought you might like it," he said, his voice softer than usual. "For all that you've done for your mother, I wanted to do something for you." Emily stared at him, at a loss for words. She had expected him to remain cold, distant, but this was different. For the first time since their marriage, she saw a glimpse of something real in his eyes. Something that wasn't driven by duty or obligation. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it spoke volumes. Dr. Turner might not be the man she had hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the man she had feared either. The possibility of something more began to stir in her heart, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that their marriage could be something beyond a contract. Maybe in time, they could build something real. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her, as Emily looked at the delicate silver necklace Dr. Turner had given her, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. It was unexpected, but it was also the first time she felt like he saw her as something more than just a contract or an obligation. She had married him under the most difficult of circumstances, with no hopes or dreams for the future, but now, as she touched the pendant, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this marriage than she had ever imagined. A small part of her had always believed that Dr. Turner was incapable of warmth, of feeling anything for someone other than himself. But that necklace, his quiet gesture, made her think twice. As the days passed, their interactions shifted. Though still formal and often distant, there were moments of unspoken understanding. When Emily found herself in a tough situation, whether at the hospital or dealing with her mother's recovery, Dr. Turner would step in quietly to help. He wasn't the affectionate, open man she had imagined in her dreams, but there was a subtle care that had begun to grow between them. It was as if, with each passing day, their marriage, though still rooted in a contract, was beginning to transform. Emily wasn't sure what was happening, but something had changed in the air between them. He didn't speak about his feelings, never opened up about his past, but the small, meaningful actions were starting to tell a different story. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, Emily sat in the living room, reading a book, when Dr. Turner walked in. He stood by the door for a moment, observing her, before speaking in his usual calm, measured voice. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes not meeting hers immediately, "about what you said, about my helping your mother." Emily looked up, surprised by the rare vulnerability in his tone. "I appreciate it," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had happened in the past weeks. "It means a lot to me." Dr. Turner nodded but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, his figure outlined against the dimming light of the evening sky. Emily watched him for a moment, unsure of what was going on in his mind. "I've been thinking too," he finally said, turning back toward her, "about how I've been." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he was finally going to open up? She didn't know whether she was ready for this conversation, but she knew it was necessary. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been too focused on work, on everything that doesn't matter," Dr. Turner admitted, his voice soft but steady. "And I've neglected people." He paused, as if the words were hard to say, but he continued. "I know you've had to deal with more than anyone should, and I want to make this right, not for you or for anyone else, but for myself." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Was this really happening? Could the man who had been so emotionally closed off, so indifferent to everything, really be saying this? She looked at him, unsure of how to respond. "I'm not asking for anything from you," he added quickly, as if reading her thoughts. I want you to know that I see you. I see what you've done, what you've sacrificed. I don't take it for granted." The sincerity in his words was undeniable. Emily had never expected to hear anything like this from him, and for a moment she just stood there, processing the enormity of what he had just said. She realized then that he wasn't just doing this for her or for anyone else. He was doing it because he had changed. He was changing, slowly but surely. She could feel it in the air between them, in the quiet moments they shared. There was still much they didn't understand about each other, but this was a start. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice filled with emotion. "That means more to me than you know." "Doctor." Turner looked at her, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of warmth, a glimpse of a man who wasn't completely lost to his work, to his past. Emily didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like they were on the same page. It wasn't love yet, but it was something, and that something was enough for her to hold on to. The days passed, and Emily found herself growing more comfortable in their strange, evolving relationship. There were still moments of tension, still moments when they didn't understand each other, but there were also moments of connection. She was beginning to see the man behind the cold exterior, someone who was capable of change, of compassion, of love. Dr. Turner, in his own way, was beginning to see her, too. And for Emily, that was enough. Maybe, just maybe, this marriage could turn into something real. Something beautiful. Something worth fighting for. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. As the weeks passed, Emily could feel a subtle shift in her and Dr. Turner's relationship. It was like a slow, quiet unfolding. A change she hadn't expected but couldn't ignore. Their conversations, though still formal, were no longer as awkward. And there were moments, small moments, where their eyes met for longer than necessary, where the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable, but somehow reassuring. Dr. Turner was still the same man he had been before, the distant, focused, and at times cold doctor. She had married out of necessity, but there was more to him now. He was showing a side of himself she had never seen before, and Emily wasn't sure if she was ready to admit it, but she was starting to feel something for him. It wasn't love yet, but it was something. Something she couldn't explain. A few days after their conversation about making things right, Emily received a call from Dr. Turner's office. He had scheduled a dinner with her, an actual dinner, just the two of them. She was surprised. Since their marriage, they had rarely shared meals together, outside of the occasional brief moments in the morning or late at night when their schedules overlapped. He had invited her out to a new restaurant, one she had never been to before. As they sat across from each other at the quiet, candlelit table, Emily couldn't help but notice how much more relaxed Dr. Wide and Umrate Turner seemed. He wasn't the stoic, emotionless man she had first encountered. He was still professional, but his eyes weren't as distant anymore. His voice wasn't as cold. They talked about nothing in particular at first: work, the weather, their daily routines, but the conversation flowed more easily than it ever had before. For the first time, it felt like they were talking as two people, not a married couple bound by a contract. "You know, Doctor," Turner said, breaking their light chatter, "I never really expected marriage to be like this." Emily looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I thought it would be simple," he said, his gaze shifting away for a moment before returning to her. "Just a contract, a deal. But it's more complicated than that, more personal than I ever thought." Emily's heart raced. Was this him finally opening up? Could it be? She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded, unsure of what to say. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," he continued, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "I've spent so much of my life shutting out everything that matters. Work, success, my reputation, everything else just didn't seem as important. But now, I'm not so sure." His words hit her like a wave. Emily's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. This was the man who had married her to satisfy some business need, the man who had never shown an ounce of affection, the man who barely spoke unless it was necessary. But now, here he was, telling her that he was questioning everything. "I don't know what this is, Doctor," Turner said quietly, "but I want to try. I want to see if we can make this work. Not just for the contract, but for us." Emily's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the man she had married. This wasn't the cold, calculating doctor she had thought he was. This was something different. And for the first time since their marriage, she felt something shift in her too. Could it be that they were on the verge of something real? Something more than what either of them had planned? As the evening wore on, they shared more stories, more small, fleeting moments of connection. Dr. Turner wasn't perfect, and neither was Emily. But in that moment, as they shared a quiet meal in the dimly lit restaurant, they were just two people who had started this journey together under strange, difficult circumstances, but who might, just might, be finding a way to make it work. When the meal ended, Dr. Turner didn't rush off to his next appointment or retreat into the familiar coldness. He walked her to the car, something he had never done before. As they stood by the door, he turned to her, his hand lingering for just a moment on her arm. "Thank you," he said softly, looking into her eyes, "for giving this a chance." Emily didn't know what to say. It was still too early to tell if this was just another one of his fleeting moments of vulnerability, or if something more was beginning to take shape between them. But as she looked at him, standing there with that rare softness in his gaze, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were on the brink of something that neither of them had expected, something real. As she drove home that night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the dinner. She had seen Dr. Turner in a way she never had before: vulnerable, questioning, open. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, was slowly revealing a side of himself she had never imagined. And for the first time, she was beginning to believe that this marriage, this strange, unexpected journey, might actually have a chance at becoming something real. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. As the weeks went by, Emily began to notice more changes in Dr. Turner, though subtle. they were undeniable. Their interactions had shifted from mere formalities to something that felt more like a partnership. It was clear that both of them were still navigating the strange dynamics of their marriage, but something had begun to change. A quiet understanding, a growing respect. Dr. Turner, once the distant, unemotional figure, had started to let down his guard. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but little by little, he began to show more of his true self. Emily noticed how, when they spoke now, he would listen more intently, and even offer opinions on things beyond work, beyond their contract. He was showing a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, a side of him that was not defined by the cold, calculating doctor persona. They still had their disagreements, still had moments where they fell back into old patterns, but there was a clear difference now. He wasn't shutting her out. And for Emily, that was enough. She had spent so many nights feeling isolated in this marriage, feeling like a stranger to the man she had married. But now, she felt like they were slowly building something real. One evening, after another long day at work, Dr. Turner came home early. Emily was surprised to see him walking through the door, just as she was finishing up dinner. "I thought you'd be working late tonight," she said, looking up from the stove. "I decided to come home," he replied, his voice more relaxed than usual. "You don't mind, do you?" Emily smiled, her heart skipping a beat. It had been so long since they had just spent time together like this, without the pressure of their contract or any outside obligations. "Not at all," she said, setting the plates down on the table. "I'm glad you're home." They ate in silence for a while, the soft clinking of silverware filling the room. But it wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it was nice. Dr. Turner seemed to be in a quieter mood that evening, almost reflective, and Emily couldn't help but wonder what was going on inside his mind. After dinner, they sat on the couch together, something they hadn't done in a long time. Emily tried to relax, but her thoughts were racing. She had seen a shift in him, but was it real? Was he finally beginning to understand what it meant to be more than just a doctor, more than just a husband by contract? "I've been thinking, Doctor," Turner said, breaking the silence, "about how things have been between us." Emily turned to look at him, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about how I've never really let anyone in," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Not really. I've spent so much of my life focused on work, on my career, that I forgot how important it is to let people get close." Emily could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time, she felt like he was truly opening up to her, not just fulfilling some obligation. "I didn't realize how much I've been shutting people out," he continued, his gaze meeting hers. "Until I married you, I didn't understand how lonely I've been." Emily's heart softened at his words. It was clear that he was trying, in his own way, to make sense of everything they had been through. "I know I haven't been the easiest person to be around," he said, almost to himself. "But I want to change that. I want us to be able to build something real, something more than just a contract." Emily didn't know what to say. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider in this marriage, but now, she was beginning to see the cracks in Dr. Turner's walls. He wasn't perfect, and she wasn't asking for him to be. But in that moment, she saw a glimpse of the man he could be, the man she had always hoped for. "I think we can do that," Emily said softly, her voice filled with hope. "We've come this far. We can make it work." Dr. Turner reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of gratitude, "for not giving up on me." It was then that Emily realized how far they had come from two strangers brought together by circumstances, to two people who were beginning to truly understand each other. There were still many obstacles ahead, still many unanswered questions about where their relationship would go. But for the first time, Emily felt a sense of peace. It wasn't love yet, but it was something deeper, something real. And that, for now, was enough. As the days continued to pass, their relationship continued to evolve. There were moments of quiet understanding, moments where they simply enjoyed each other's company, without the weight of expectations. Emily began to see a future in which they weren't just fulfilling the terms of a contract, but building something together, a life, a partnership, a marriage that was more than just paper and promises. It was messy, imperfect, and uncertain, but it was theirs. And for the first time, Emily believed that maybe, just maybe, it could become something beautiful. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor. But when he cancels a surgery for her, Emily felt like she had been living in a dream, one where everything had changed in the span of a few weeks. What started as a cold, calculated marriage of convenience between her and Dr. Turner had slowly transformed into something she couldn't quite put into words. They had both come a long way from the distance and formality that once defined their relationship. As they spent more time together, she started to see a man who was no longer solely defined by his career or his professional armor. A man who was beginning to soften, and she couldn't deny that she was beginning to care for him. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, something unexpected happened that threatened to shatter the fragile bond they had started to build. It was a Tuesday evening when Emily first sensed something was wrong. Dr. Turner had been distant all day, not in his usual detached way, but more tense. He wasn't answering her questions fully, and he was distracted, always checking his phone and muttering to himself under his breath. Emily tried to push it aside at first, thinking that perhaps it was just the stress of his work. But the more she observed, the more she realized that something wasn't right. As the day wore on, Dr. Turner became increasingly withdrawn. At dinner, he hardly spoke, pushing his food around on his plate, his mind clearly elsewhere. Emily felt the weight of his silence pressing in on her, and finally, unable to stand it any longer, she spoke up. "James," she said softly, using his first name for the first time in what felt like forever. "What's going on?" He looked up at her, his eyes slightly glazed over, as if he hadn't expected her to ask. "I'm fine," he replied quickly, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. There was something else there, something he wasn't saying. Emily wasn't buying it. She could see the strain in his posture, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table like he was holding on to something. "No, you're not," she insisted, her voice gentle but firm. "You've been like this all day. Talk to me, please." For a long moment he didn't answer, and Emily could see the internal struggle within him. He wanted to open up, she could tell, but something was holding him back. Finally, he exhaled sharply, as if giving in to the weight of the moment. "It's work," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been dealing with some things at the hospital. There's a big case coming up, and I'm worried." Emily nodded, trying to process what he was saying. She could understand the pressure he must be feeling, but there was something more beneath his words, something he wasn't saying. "You've been under a lot of stress lately," she said carefully, watching his reaction. "But that's not the whole story, is it?" "Doctor." Turner was quiet again, his eyes flicking toward the window, as if the answer he needed was somewhere out there. Then, without warning, he turned back to her, his voice low and rough. "It's not just the work," he admitted. "It's everything. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to handle us." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I mean," he said, taking a deep breath, "I've never been good at relationships, Emily. I've spent my whole life focusing on my career, on building a name for myself, and now, with you, I don't know how to make it work. I don't know how to be what you need me to be." His words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined that Dr. Turner, this man who had always been so confident, so composed, would open up to her like this, would admit his vulnerabilities so honestly. But in that moment, she saw him as a man, not just a doctor, and it was more than she could have hoped for. "James," she said softly, her voice full of understanding, "you don't have to be perfect. I never expected you to be. I need you to be here, with me, and I'm willing to do the same for you. We'll figure this out together." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and relief. For a long time, neither of them spoke. But in that silence, something shifted. Dr. Turner's walls, the ones he had built so high, began to crumble. And in their place was a quiet promise. A promise that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real together. The next few days were filled with small, quiet moments. They spent more time together, not just in the big gestures, but in the little things. Sharing meals, talking about their day, and even laughing at the little absurdities of life. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Emily began to see a side of Dr. Turner that she hadn't known existed. He wasn't just the cold, distant doctor she had married. He was a man with his own fears, his own insecurities, and for the first time, he was willing to let her in. It wasn't love yet, but Emily felt a warmth growing between them, a connection she hadn't expected. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, their marriage could become something more than just a contract. It could be a partnership, a true partnership. And as the days went by, Emily realized that the man she had married, the man she had once thought was beyond her reach, might just be the one to help her discover a love she never thought was possible. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. As the weeks passed, Emily began to notice a change in herself as well. What had started as a marriage of convenience was now beginning to feel like something real, something she hadn't expected. The moments with Dr. Turner, though still few and far between, were becoming more meaningful. She wasn't just surviving this marriage anymore. She was beginning to live it, to find a connection with the man she had married. Despite everything, Emily found herself hoping that they could build something together. It was still early, but the foundation was there, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't walking this journey alone. One evening, as they sat in their living room after dinner, Emily noticed Dr. Turner was unusually quiet. She could tell he was deep in thought, his eyes distant as he stared out the window. It had become a habit for them to talk after dinner, even if it was about nothing significant, but tonight he seemed lost in his own world. Emily sat beside him, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "James," she said softly, her voice full of concern, "what's going on?" He looked up at her, his expression softening, though there was still a hint of something behind his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "about everything, about us." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what he meant by that, but she could feel the weight of his words. "What about us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, as if weighing his next words carefully. "When we first got married, I was doing it out of obligation," he began, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a hint of vulnerability. "I didn't think about how it would affect you or me. I was just focused on the fact that I had to do it because it was easier, because it was convenient. But over the past few weeks, I've started to realize something. I've started to care." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected him to say those words. Care? For her? The man who had been so distant, so focused on his work, was now telling her that he cared. "You don't have to say anything," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. For you, for us." Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. Dr. Turner, the man she had once thought of as cold and unemotional, was opening up to her in a way that made her heart swell. She had never imagined this moment, never thought that the man she married out of necessity could turn into someone who wanted to build something real with her. "I want us to have a future," he said, his voice quieter now, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to try. I want to see where this can go." Emily didn't know what to say at first. She had waited so long for this moment, and now that it was here, it felt surreal. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that he wasn't just speaking from a place of obligation anymore. He was speaking from the heart, and for the first time in their marriage, she believed him. "I don't know where this will go either," Emily said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "But I'm willing to try too." They sat there in silence for a while, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. They had both admitted that they were willing to take the next step, to try and build something that wasn't just a marriage of convenience, but something real, something based on understanding, trust, and maybe even love. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments and small but meaningful conversations. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still times when old habits resurfaced, when Dr. Turner became distant, or Emily felt overwhelmed by the pressures of their lives. But there was a newfound sense of hope between them. They weren't perfect, but they were willing to try. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Emily received a call from the hospital. Dr. Turner had arranged for her mother to have a follow-up appointment, and this time, he was personally overseeing the care. It was a gesture she realized, that went beyond his professional duty. It was a sign that he was invested, not just in the well-being of her mother, but in her life, in their life together. When she shared the news with him later that evening, he smiled a small but genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "I know it's been hard," he said softly, "but I want to help, Emily. I want to be a part of this, of your life." In that moment, Emily realized that this wasn't just a marriage anymore. It wasn't just two people living under the same roof because they had to. It was a partnership, one that had been built slowly, carefully, but with a foundation that was starting to feel like something real. And as she looked at Dr. Turner, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the man she had married out of obligation was becoming someone she could truly love. And for the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe that a future together was possible, one that wasn't just about surviving, but about thriving. She is forced to marry a cold-hearted doctor, but when he cancels a surgery for her. As Emily stood by the window, looking out at the city lights below, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she and Dr. Turner had come. What started as a marriage born out of necessity, a simple contract between two strangers, had transformed into something neither of them had expected. They had both changed, grown in ways neither of them could have imagined when they first met. And for the first time since their wedding, Emily felt like she was truly living, truly in a partnership with someone who saw her, understood her, and she hoped cared for her. Dr. Turner, the man who had once been so distant, was now a part of her life, in a way that was both comforting and surprising. He had shown her vulnerability, something she never thought he was capable of. And though they had both come to this marriage for reasons that had nothing to do with love, they were now beginning to build something real together. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when they disagreed, when the weight of their past or their respective fears would threaten to pull them apart. But they had learned how to communicate, how to listen to each other, how to be there for one another. And that, Emily realized, was what really mattered. A few months had passed since that pivotal evening when Dr. Turner had opened up to her, and things between them had only grown stronger. They spent more time together, not just in the quiet moments after work, but in real, meaningful conversations about their hopes, their fears, and the future. Dr. Turner had started to show up in ways that Emily hadn't expected, taking care of her mother's medical needs, listening to her when she needed to talk, and, in his own way, showing her that he was invested in this marriage, in their life together. Emily had learned that love wasn't always grand gestures. Sometimes, it was the small, everyday things that meant the most, and she could see that in Dr. Turner now. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, sharing a quiet dinner, Dr. Turner looked at her, his gaze soft and thoughtful. "Emily," he said, his voice sincere, "I know we didn't start this the way most people would, but I've come to realize something." Emily looked up at him, her heart fluttering with anticipation. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I didn't think I could love again," he said, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "I didn't think I could ever open up to anyone, especially not after everything I've been through. But with you, it's different. I want us to be real. I want to build a future with you, if you'll have me." Emily's heart raced. She had always hoped that this moment would come, but hearing it from him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, made everything feel more real than she ever could have imagined. "James," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I never expected this either, but I do want this. I want us to have something real, something lasting. I believe in us, in what we've built together." There was a moment of silence between them, but it was the kind of silence that felt right, comfortable. The kind of silence that spoke volumes without saying a word. Dr. Turner smiled, his eyes softening as he squeezed her hand. "Then let's make it official," he said. "Let's start our future together. No more contracts, no more pretending, just us." Emily's smile was the brightest it had ever been. For the first time, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The uncertainty, the fear, the doubt, everything that had held her back from truly embracing this marriage, this life, had melted away. They were no longer just two people bound by a contract. They were partners, a team, and, for the first time, she felt like she had found the person she had always hoped for. That night, as they sat together, planning their future and dreaming of what was to come, Emily realized that sometimes love didn't come in the way you expected. Sometimes it grew slowly, quietly, and when you least expected it, it could become the most beautiful thing in the world. And as she looked at Dr. Turner, she knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. They had come a long way from where they started, and the future was now wide open, full of possibilities. They had found something real, something worth fighting for, and Emily couldn't help but feel that the best was yet to come. In this touching and transformative tale, we follow the journey of a woman forced into a marriage with a cold-hearted doctor, but through unexpected acts of kindness, their bond grows into something real. This is one of those incredible millionaire stories that shows how love can develop in the most unlikely circumstances, starting with a marriage made for convenience but slowly evolving into something genuine. As the story unfolds, the once distant doctor opens up and shows vulnerability, surprising the woman who never thought she would experience a relationship built on real emotions. Their marriage, initially grounded in obligation, shifts into a partnership as they both learn to navigate their fears, their careers, and their personal growth. This millionaire story isn't just about wealth. It's about the heart, about change, and about finding love where you least expect it. The couple's quiet moments, shared dreams, and growing trust transform their connection into something that feels deep and lasting. From a contract to something more meaningful, this millionaire story demonstrates that love isn't always about the grand gestures, but about the quiet moments of understanding and support. As their relationship deepens, both characters realize that sometimes life's most beautiful moments come from the smallest gestures of kindness. Their journey is a testament to the power of love, trust, and personal growth, making this one of the most unforgettable millionaire stories out there. This millionaire story proves that even in the most unconventional circumstances, love has the power to change lives forever.